Spiritism is a science. As Kardec said, a science that studies the origin, the destiny, the nature of spirits, and the interaction with the corporeal world. It's interesting because when we talk about science, people ask, is this the science like the material science? It's a science in the sense of it has a structure in terms of its set of principles, and it progresses. It's a progressive body of knowledge because we expand consciousness and we understand more. Day after day, we'll acquire more understanding about how life goes on. But the object of the study of Spiritism is the origin, the nature, and the destiny of our spirits and our interaction with the corporeal world. So in the definition, there is an invitation for us. Self-knowledge and also of contemplation of what happens in two worlds. So it gives us bifocal lenses for life. For the first time in humanity, we are going to be invited to use reasoning and practice a new way of seeing life and ourselves. Because when we say bifocal, we have that vision of what's happening here in the material world, but we don't restrict to it because we know there is the one ahead, the spiritual, which is the real, as Kardec says, the real life. This is passing, temporary, but that one is the real life. So in the definition of Spiritism, Kardec brings to us the invitation for a new lifestyle. It has to change ourselves. If it doesn't change us, we haven't got the true understanding of it all. So in the studying, we're invited to study ourselves. It's a constant observation of what we are, what we're here for, what's going to happen afterwards, and throughout the expansion of Kardec's words into all the other works that were psychographed by the medium Chico Xavier and later by Divaldo Franco and also by other mediums and non-mediums, and we would include here thinkers in Spiritism like Leon Denis, Gabriel Delaine, Camille Flammarion, and others. We have this study of the Spiritist science from the perspective of this progress of the soul. And it's interesting because Spiritism, why does it come now with its format as the framework? Many people think of Spiritism as phenomena, mediumship, as if Spiritism created mediumship, as if Spiritism created communication with spirits. But in reality, is Spiritism focusing on the study of ourselves and the interaction with the world and how we progress. It invites us to understand even mediumship, which was one of our faculties, from a different angle. So when Kardec proposes the practice of mediumship under the framework of Spiritism, he's giving us unprecedented tools, an educational system, a school system, a curriculum, we would say, for us to educate our mediumship as we educate our intellect. There is nothing, it's unparalleled, there's nothing like that in the world. There are evidences of the same accounts, but not in the framework that we have in Spiritism. Whenever we go through this pathway, it becomes safer, the practice of mediumship. Spirit communication becomes more meaningful, and even the mediums become healthier. Even the scientific studies that we see nowadays in Brazil by researchers show that mediums who educated their mediumship under the framework of Spiritism, they are healthier, mentally speaking, than people who are mediums and don't practice mediumship under the framework of Spiritism, or even ordinary people who are not mediums. So then it's interesting because it bridges up on how I got to know Spiritism, and um, it comes through a family history. My great grandfather, he was Italian, moved to Brazil in the beginning of the 20th century, and when he was there, he married, and my great grandmother had some issues. People didn't know. It could be a mental illness, it could be possession, people thought. They were Catholic. So they searched for the church, etc. Nothing. She would respond to nothing, medicine or the church, treatments, etc. That's when they got to know of a family who knew Kardec's works and treated together after the healing of my grandmother through the disobsession treatments of Spiritism. They founded the Spiritist Center that is turning 100 years in 2017 and still exists. Through the works of many generations, I was born in a Spiritist family. And I was born doesn't mean anything. Some people think, oh, you're born in Spiritist just because you're born in a Spiritist family. That's not true. I have 4 brothers, and not necessarily all of them are Spiritists, though we were raised in a Spiritist family, and we went to the Spiritist Center and were educated in Spiritist educational meetings for children and youth. But when I was 7 years old, I had pneumonia 5 times in 1 year. And we were living in Rio de Janeiro, and my parents were desperate, and the doctor said there's nothing else we can do. And that's when they got to know of the Spiritist Center in Rio de Janeiro, in the Ilha do Governador, one of the neighborhoods in Brazil. And at the time, I got to know Godinho, the current president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, was living there too. And he used to go to the same center. And we were there. They started bringing me there and also treating with homeopathy. And then in a few months, I healed. And from that moment on, through that caution, my parents kept us in the Spiritist education. And I remember when I turned 14, I was in the Spiritist youth group in Ribeirão Preto. And then they had works in the suburbs. But in suburbs in Brazil means the at-risk people. And they asked who would like to join forces and help them out, do the outreach work, and teach Spiritism, do the Spiritist education for children there. And I volunteered, and I started working with children, teaching Spiritism. And then when I was 17, I started coordinating a new effort in another center named Pole of Tarsus in Ribeirão Preto, forming a group to share Spiritist teachings, educational lessons to children who were at risk in another neighborhood. Well, kept studying Spiritism, etc. But when I turned 24, I graduated, got my PhD. I was invited to come for a postdoc in the United States. And when I came here, no center. I never thought about doing anything like being president of a Spiritist center, forming a Spiritist center. It's so comfortable in Brazil. Every center. And you need a passes any morning, afternoon, evening, many places. When I realized, when I got here, oh my God, I'm going to be here for a year and there is no center. Oh, I wrote to Divaldo Franco and asked him, where can I find a Spiritist center? I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. He referred me to John Zirio at the time, who had a publisher of Spiritist books. He was in Arizona. And he wrote back to me and said, you can contact the Rockville group, the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Maryland. which was that at that time coordinated by Vanderlei Marques, who was then the president of the United States Spiritist Council, currently the United States Spiritist Federation. Now he's discarnated. So I called him, and he referred me to Ely Rees. And then, actually, I called Ely Rees, and then she referred me to Vanderlei. Vanderlei, I didn't have a car at the time. He picked me up at a metro nearby. I came from Baltimore by train, then metro. He took me to the center, and then I met Godinho. Second week, I got a car. Bottom line, I couldn't go from Baltimore to that location of Maryland because I didn't have a car. I couldn't keep renting the car. So very naively, I turned to Godinho, the current president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, then just coordinator of the study group with his wife, because all the other directors were traveling, because it was vacation time, like summertime. So I said, can you guys come to Baltimore and do like a study session there? Because I needed it, like do a God at home meeting, like a gospel at home. And then they asked me, do you know any other spiritists there? I will find out. I will find out because I can't keep coming here and I really need it. So then this insight was like, man, where there are Brazilians, there is Spiritism. So I got a list of Brazilians that I knew lived in the greater Baltimore area, and they started calling and leaving messages. And if you want to come, we're going to open a Spiritist group. We were going to have a first meeting on October 18th or 19th to 1998. That was like how long it took the whole thing from summer to beginning it. And it began in my apartment complex, and that's how the Spiritist out of Baltimore began. We had no intention whatsoever of forming a group. My dream was to go back to Brazil at the time. That was my dream. Go back, keep working in Brazil as a scientist, psychologist, whatever people wanted, like faculty, teaching, love teaching. But surprise, surprise, I got to know when the groups are growing, then I understood I'm no longer here for the science part of it. The suffering of immigration, the adjustments, really pushed me to find the consolation in Spiritism. More and more I gravitated to it, and then I started understanding that it was then a choice of staying to keep the flame burning. Godinho had to go back to Brazil. We kept coordinating the group. Later we formed, and now there is the SSB. And then when we turned 9 years in Baltimore, I was working at the University of Maryland. And by the way, we started before the SSB, before we continued the SSB, we started the youth group in Rockville with the children who were the children of the diplomats of the time, teaching Spiritism. And we have beautiful lessons because Daniel Santos from Baltimore, he got to know how to do websites, etc., because this 21-year-old Bruno in our group, the youth group, he had myasthenias gravis. He couldn't walk. He could only move a finger. But with that finger, he created websites. He taught Daniel how to make websites between 1999 and the year 2000 using one finger with a computer. And that's how Daniel learned about creating websites. Thanks to that youth group. The 21-year-old boy, he knew it. And then from there on, one day we received the instruction to form a group in Virginia, in the state of Virginia. And we came, and now we're asked to spread it out to the city of Washington, D.C. And then in between that, already living in Virginia, but still participating in Baltimore and coordinating the efforts there, I was coming back from Baltimore from the mediumistic meeting. and driving back like 87 miles driving from the center in Baltimore to home. So it's like quite a drive. The mentor said, Vanessa, when you go back home, don't sit at the table, because I used to have a quick, snack with Carlos and talk a little bit with him before going to bed. He said, don't do this. Sit by the computer, you and Carlos, because I want to show you how you're going to form the Spiritist radio. And I was like, radio? I recall like 2 years prior, Richard Simonetti told us to form a radio, but I was like, that's too much for us. Like, I'm not a journalist. I don't know where to start with. Carlos is a journalist, but he doesn't work on this any longer. But he said, Benjamin Franklin, he's the mentor of the SSP. He said, he's asking you to do this because actually we're late. We have to work on this. And I said, when do we need to launch it? This was June. He said, in 2 weeks, on July 4th. And I was like, okay. I got home. Carlos, can we instead sit at the computer? And I had, sincerely, no idea how to put anything together. I wasn't webmaster. Like in 2 hours, he showed us the venue to start the radio, how to create the website, things I've never done in my life. In 2 weeks we started it, July 4th, 2011 at 12 p.m. because he said that's the day we celebrate freedom. And it's interesting because he asked us to start with an interview with Gary Schwartz. And Gary Schwartz is a scientist who is inspired by William James, and he knows. And he said in the radio, Vanessa, we're declaring the independence of the spirit on the earth. That was his insight. He's not a spiritist. From there on, things just... In 2 weeks, we had scheduled interviews until the end of the year. I mean, in 2 weeks, we scheduled people until December 31st that year. And from there on, it started expanding. Now, 5 years later, we have programs 7 days a week. Listeners in 100 countries. I don't know how this happens. We don't do anything. We just do the work. And that combines with the works of the Spiritist magazine, which is the only periodical in English in the English-speaking movement in Spiritism. And it's by the efforts of the International Spiritist Council, though the Spiritists out of Virginia sponsors part of it too. These are some of the things people ask, but why do we do this? Because in the United States, people don't get it yet, what it would do. Do you get paid to do this? No, none of us do. And it's not ours. We're just sharing the news. It's service. And it's service, not only reaching out, giving food to homeless, etc., but it's also service in sharing the spiritual bread. Why do we do this? Because we know what it is to need this spiritual bread and not have it. Though I was raised in a Spiritist family, there were several moments in my life, especially when I came to the United States, and the difficulties of adaptation, etc., and later other personal issues as well, that I found that Spiritism is life-saving. And I think if I could say what Spiritism brought to me specifically, self-love. Because often we reincarnate having this unexplained guilt, this difficulty in really flowing in life. But in Spiritism, I found self-love. How to love myself. And I remember, we talk about Jesus and Spiritism being the Christ coming back, as he said, the promised consoler. I will be back with you. I will send you a promised consoler that is going to stay with you throughout times for the rest of time. We believe in Jesus, we talk about Jesus, but in reality, it was in one night when many problems were really puzzling me, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it. I couldn't explain. That I looked at myself, and I remember I knelt down, I was crying, and I recalled the teachings of the book of Boa Nova, Good News, which is actually about the life of Jesus on the earth and the passages. And I recall the passages, and I felt that I was talking to him. I'm not saying that he came here, he talked in spirit, but I just felt that I was communicating with him, myself, saying, you are the only one that understands and knows that can help me. So now I ask you, please give me an opportunity to see clearly the way out of this, because I know only you can do this. I beg of you, please. And I remember kneeling down and crying, and from that I felt this relief. I've never felt Jesus so close to me. I finally understood more why he said he came to help us. He came to really get us out and love God above all things, others as we love ourselves. From there on, my life made so much more sense that I said, it's a matter of public health. We need to share these teachings because they bring new health to us. I can't keep it to myself alone because it sustains my life. It's just sharing the bread. And that's why we keep sharing the bread of God, the bread of Jesus, with all of our friends, with everyone. And it's just fascinating. There are no regrets, no matter the obstacles and the challenges. It's worthwhile.